Houston, Texas, 1897. A humid night clung to the ramshackle house on Elm Street. Crickets chirped a monotonous symphony, punctuated by the occasional cough from my ailing grandmother, Amelia. The air, thick with the scent of stale medicine and desperation, hung heavy in my lungs. Amelia, once a vibrant woman with a mane of silver hair, now lay skeletal beneath a threadbare sheet. Grief had become my constant companion since her husband, my grandfather, passed away a month ago. He was my rock, the anchor in our storm of a life. Now, with Amelia fading fast, the storm threatened to swallow me whole. That's when Sarah, my best friend since childhood, arrived. Her normally bright eyes were clouded with concern. We sat by Amelia's bedside, whispering stories of a happier time, a feeble attempt to ward off the inevitable. As the witching hour drew near, Sarah, who had always dabbled in the occult, produced a leather-bound book from her satchel. "I found something, Emily," she said, her voice barely a whisper. My heart pounded against my ribs. Sarah knew my stance on the occult, a mix of morbid curiosity and unwavering skepticism. But tonight, with despair gnawing at my resolve, I found myself leaning closer. The book, its edges frayed and cover adorned with strange symbols, spoke of a forbidden ritual, a way to briefly reanimate the recently deceased. It required an offering, a personal object imbued with strong emotional connection, placed on the deceased's chest while chanting specific phrases under a full moon. The absurdity of it all struck me first. Then came the flicker of hope, a tiny ember refusing to be extinguished by logic. "It can't be real, Sarah," I said, my voice hoarse. "There's no harm in trying, Emily. Not if we follow it exactly," Sarah insisted, her eyes pleading. Desperation, a relentless serpent coiled around my heart. Could this be a chance to see Grandpa one last time? To tell him goodbye properly? The thought of hearing his booming laugh again, even for a fleeting moment, was a balm on my raw grief. The full moon cast an eerie glow through the dusty window, bathing the room in an ethereal light. Sarah and I, hands trembling, prepared for the ritual. We found Grandpa's worn pocket watch, engraved with a loving inscription, and placed it on Amelia's chest. The chanting began. The words, a bizarre mix of Latin and archaic English, felt alien on my tongue. As we reached the final incantation, a jolt of energy surged through the room. The air crackled with an unseen force. Amelia's chest rose and fell, a shallow, labored breath. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing the vacant white of cataracts beneath. But for a fleeting moment, a spark of recognition flickered in those clouded eyes. "Emily?" A raspy voice, barely a whisper, escaped her lips. Tears welled up in my eyes. It was him, a pale imitation of the man I loved, but it was him nonetheless. "Grandpa," I choked out, a sob escaping my throat. Amelia's head turned toward Sarah. "Who is this girl?" the voice rasped, devoid of warmth. A wave of icy dread washed over me. Sarah's eyes widened in horror. The spark in Amelia's eyes had vanished, replaced by something alien, something hungry. As Amelia's skeletal hand reached out, clawing at Sarah, the book clattered to the floor, its pages fluttering open to a chilling illustration, a grotesque creature with vacant eyes and a hunger for the living. The caption below sent a fresh wave of terror crashing down on me. "The Reanimated, a devourer of souls." The floorboards creaked behind me. A cold gust of wind, devoid of any source, swept through the room, extinguishing the lamp by the bedside. I spun around, heart hammering against my ribs. In the inky blackness, two glowing white orbs materialized, fixated on me. The rasping voice, no longer human, filled the room. "Who else is here?" Paralyzed by terror, I could only stare at the glowing orbs in the darkness. "Sarah!" A choked scream ripped from her throat, scrambled back, knocking over a chair with a crash that echoed in the oppressive silence. The rasping voice reverberated, seemingly emanating from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Who else is here?" it repeated, closer this time, carrying the stench of decay and damp earth. Adrenaline surged through my body, snapping me out of my frozen state. I lunged for the fallen book, scrambling for some scrap of knowledge, some desperate hope against the encroaching nightmare. My fingers brushed the cracked leather cover as the room lurched sideways. A sickening crack filled the air, followed by a low groan. Sarah screamed again, a high-pitched, frenzied sound that sent chills down my spine. Through the swirling darkness, I glimpsed a pale, skeletal arm reaching out from beneath the overturned bed. Panic clawed at my throat. I didn't need the book to tell me what that arm belonged to. The grotesque illustration danced in my mind's eye. Ignoring the rising tide of nausea, I shoved the book at Sarah, my voice barely above a whisper aside, "Find the reversal spell. There has to be one." Before she could respond, another sickening crack split the air. This time it was the wardrobe, its wooden door splintering outwards. A skeletal hand, impossibly long and skeletal, emerged from the darkness within, its touch sending a tremor through the room. The entity it belonged to, the reanimated abomination that once housed Amelia, let out a guttural roar, a sound that promised an eternity of suffering. Sarah, bless her, seemed to understand my desperate plea. Snatching the book, she scurried towards the window, its pale light offering the only refuge in this tomb of terror. I scrambled after her, my breath ragged, my legs weak. Behind us, the monstrosity lunged forward, a snarling maw filled with jagged teeth. The stench of decay intensified, choking the air. We reached the window just as the creature's skeletal fingers scraped it against the headboard of the bed. With a desperate heave, I pushed it open, shattering the agate glass. Fresh air fluted the room, carrying the scent of life and desperation. Without hesitation, Sarah clambered onto the rickety window ledge. "Jump!" she screamed over her shoulder, her eyes wide with fear. I hesitated. The ground looked a long way down. The creature unleashed another ear-splitting roar, closer this time. Panic gnawed at the edges of my sanity. With a choked sob, I launched myself through the broken window, landing awkwardly on the damp earth below. The impact stole the breath from my lungs, but I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my ankle. A glance back at the house confirmed my worst fears. Sarah was gone. Whether she managed to escape or not, I couldn't tell in the darkness. The only sound that reached my ears was the unholy growls emanating from the shattered window, chilling me to the bone. Gripped by a primal urge for survival, I stumbled away from the house, the chilling white orbs still burning through the darkness in the room. I didn't dare look back. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sounded like the monstrous entity gaining ground. As dawn broke, painting the sky with streaks of pink and orange, I found myself on the outskirts of Houston. Exhausted and battered, I collapsed under a large oak tree, my body a symphony of aches and pains. The events of the night replayed in my mind, a horrific nightmare refusing to release its hold. Was Sarah alive? Had the ritual worked for her? More importantly, was there any way to stop the reanimated horror I had unleashed? The book, my only hope, lay forgotten on the floorboards of the house along with the horrifying knowledge it contained. Tears streamed down my face as the enormity of my actions hit me. In my grief, I had opened a door to a world of darkness, and now the price had to be paid. With a shaky breath, I rose to my feet, the rising sun warming my face. There was no point dwelling on what-ifs. I had to find the book, find the reversal spell, and stop the entity before it devoured everything in its path. The journey ahead would be fraught with peril, but hope, a fragile ember, flickered within me. For Sarah, for the memory of my grandfather, for the sake of Houston, I had to find a way to stop the Reanimated. My trek back to Elm Street was fueled by a desperate hope and a gnawing fear. The house stood silent under the afternoon sun, its windows like vacant eyes staring out at the world. With a deep breath, I pushed open the creaking front door, the stench of decay hitting me like a physical blow. Inside, the room was a tableau of horror. The overturned furniture, the shattered window, the book lying open on the floor. All testaments to the previous night's events. But Sarah was gone. No sign of a struggle, no clue to her fate. My heart plummeted. Had she escaped? Had the creature... Pushing the morbid thought away, I snatched the book. My eyes scanned the pages frantically, searching for the reversal spell. My stomach lurched as I found it, a complex ritual requiring rare herbs, moonlight, and a personal object tied to the reanimated creature. Obtaining the herbs would be a challenge, but I had no choice. The clock was ticking. Hours bled into days as I scoured the city's apothecaries and occult shops, the weight of the secret I carried heavier with each passing minute. The night of the full moon arrived, cloaking the city in an ethereal glow. I stood before the house, a circle of chalked symbols drawn around it, the herbs burning in an iron pot at its center. The air crackled with a strange energy, a warning of the power I was attempting to wield. As the ritual reached its climax, the windows of the house shattered inwards. The reanimated monstrosity lumbered out, its skeletal frame bathed in moonlight, its white orbs glowing with malevolent hunger. Fear threatened to consume me, but the image of Sarah, dead or worse, spurred me on. I chanted the final incantation, pouring all my remaining strength into my voice. The air crackled, a blinding light engulfed the entity, and then silence. The creature was gone, reduced to a pile of dust on the front porch. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost knocked me off my feet. But the victory was bittersweet. As I turned to leave, a guttural moan echoed from within the house. My heart lurched. Was the ritual incomplete? With trembling hands, I drew a shaky breath and pushed open the door. Inside, a frail figure lay sprawled on the floor, bathed in the moonlight streaming through the shattered window. It was Sarah, unconscious but alive. As I rushed to her side, a single chilling thought echoed in my mind. The house may be empty now, but the darkness I had unleashed still lingered. The fight, I realized, had only just begun.